Morning, everybody. It's good to see such an impressive turnout today for the third STEP annual conference and for the launch of Cleaner Air for Scotland. So what I want to do in this presentation is just to give a brief overview of how we've got to where we are today, and just to set the scene for the presentations that are going to come after this over the rest of the day. So why and how? Why do we need Cleaner Air for Scotland, and how have we done it? What's been involved in the process in terms of consultation and collaboration, how the concept of the strategy has evolved over the development process, and finally to publication and today, and then after today, what we're going to do next in terms of implementation. So we've already heard something about this in the Minister's speech and the address from the European Environment Agency. We all know that Scotland already has some of the best air quality in Europe. Emissions have been falling steadily over the recent years, and that's been largely due to tighter controls on industrial emissions and also increasingly stringent vehicle and fuel standards. So I think it's probably fair to say that the air that we breathe today is probably overall better than at any time since the Industrial Revolution. So if we're saying all that, I suppose the obvious question is, why do we need cleaner air for Scotland? Well, there's lots of good reasons why we need cleaner air for Scotland, as I'm sure you've all noticed. Various stories that have appeared in the media over the last couple of years as air quality starts to attract an increasingly high profile in the news. Also, most importantly, or particularly important, this is something we're going to hear about in a bit more detail later on, is the number of deaths brought forward that can be attributable to air pollution in Scotland. More than 2,000 deaths, premature deaths, can be linked to fine particulate matter. So it's quite obvious that while we've done well, we've achieved a lot, there's still a lot more that we can do to drive down air pollution levels even further. So a bit more background. More local authorities are declaring air quality management areas in Scotland. We've got, I think it's 33 that we've got at the moment across a large number of urban areas. Many of these local authorities have got long-established action plans with a wide range of measures, but progress in improving air quality has perhaps not been as fast as we would have hoped. There's many complex reasons for that, but perhaps some of the most important reasons are that the measures with the biggest potential impacts tend to be expensive or presentationally difficult. Things like low emission zones, congestion charging, large-scale modal shift from private vehicles to public transport, and encouraging active transport. So the big cities, Aberdeen, Edinburgh and Glasgow, have all either completed or are undertaking, or in the process of undertaking, LEZ feasibility studies. But so far we've had no LEZ established in Scotland, despite widespread adoption elsewhere in Europe. So we got to thinking that a national approach to low emission zones might help acceptability by providing certainty for businesses and transport operators, by setting the same standards to be met everywhere. So somebody entering Glasgow, for example, with a vehicle can be confident that they can enter Aberdeen with exactly the same vehicle, or Edinburgh with exactly the same vehicle, and meet exactly the same standards. So back in the summer of 2013, we publicly announced that we were going to develop a national framework for low emission zones, which, as we started to think about how that would actually work in practice, the concept developed into plans for a national low emission strategy within which the LEZ framework would sit. So at the time, we decided that the aim of a national low emission strategy would be to draw together various policies being implemented and developed across a range of government portfolios which have the potential to improve air quality and other cross-cutting environmental issues, and try and present these within a coherent overall framework, an approach which we maybe haven't taken before. So, timeline for development. Back in the summer of last year, we held a series of consultation workshops on planning, transport and business and energy. The purpose of those workshops was to inform the content of the draft strategy, and around 50 private and public sector organisations participated in that series of workshops. We also undertook a series of structured interviews with a range of organisations to provide more in-depth input. And quite an important aspect of this process was that we didn't want to waste time and resources reinventing stuff that had already been done elsewhere, so we undertook quite an extensive literature review to learn from experience both in the rest of the UK, in Europe, and also across the rest of the world. So following that, we started work on developing a draft low emission strategy. It was developed by the Scottish Government, Transport Scotland, Scottish Environment Protection Agency, and also a huge amount of additional support and feedback from STEP members and from the Scottish Urban Air Quality Group. So as the Minister said in her speech, the draft low emission strategy was officially launched by the Transport Minister at last year's STEP event. And after that, we proceeded to the consultation phase. We published our consultation paper in January of this year. And also, in the early part of this year, we established a series of working groups to provide more detailed consultation input on key elements of the draft strategy. Those working groups focused on the low emission zone framework, modelling and monitoring, transport sustainability and planning. So each of those groups met several times during the consultation period, with some groups also meeting throughout the final development phase to give us additional feedback as well. We also adopted some additional consultation approaches. In the spring of this year, we held a further series of telephone interviews with key individuals and organisations to ensure that their views were captured as part of the process. And we also set up an online survey for more informal recording of consultees' views. So consultees had several options available to contribute to the development process. The formal consultation process concluded in April, and we received around 70 responses, overwhelmingly supportive of the general principles. And then following that, we held a post-consultation workshop on the 29th of May, which involved additional input from many of those individuals and organisations that had contributed to the consultation process. So the low emission strategy started to take shape after that. We've had an overall mission, which was to protect and enhance health, wellbeing, environment, placemaking and sustainable economic growth through improved air quality across Scotland. A vision that Scotland's air quality will be the best in Europe, and a series of key policy objectives across transport, health, placemaking, legislation and policy, communications and climate change. So up until that point, we were calling this strategy the low emission strategy. And at that point, we decided to change the title. Feedback was suggesting that when people think of emissions, their first thought is climate change, greenhouse gases, rather than air quality. And also, low emission strategy means something to those of us that are involved in the process, but the average person in the street, low emission strategy possibly doesn't mean very much. So we tried to come up with a better title to more clearly express what we're trying to do here. And we set on Cleaner Air for Scotland, which focuses on air pollution and at the same time sets out clearly, even to non-experts, what we're trying to do here. And this is what the final strategy looks like, and you'll be able to see this later today, both in terms of printed copy and online. So what's in the strategy? We've got a wide range of actions covering the 6 objectives, some highlights though. As has already been said, we're going to adopt the World Health Organization guideline values for particulate matter in Scottish legislation. It's important to re-emphasise the point that this makes us the first country in Europe to do this, which I think is a clear statement of our level of ambition here. We're also introducing a national modelling framework and a national low emission framework, which you're going to hear about in more detail in the 2 presentations that follow this one. And we're also going to develop a national communication strategy, which is going to tie into existing work that's already being done by Greener Scotland in relation to climate change. So what happens next? So we're launching the strategy today, but in many ways that's really just the start of the hard work. Now we've got to go ahead and implement it. So, as I've already just said, we've got a wide range of actions within the strategy that we're going to take forward, but this is just some of the key highlights that we want to treat as a priority, and this is just an overview of where we want to be in 5 years' time. So at the moment, we're not fully compliant with our EU air quality targets. In 2020, we want to be fully compliant with those targets. In 2015, we've got 32 local air quality management areas, and in 2020, we want to have made significant progress towards revocation of those air quality management areas. And across that time period as well, we also want to establish the National Low Emission Framework and be in a situation where that process is being implemented and action is being taken. You'll hear more about that in the presentation that's to come on that. So that's kind of where we started from, how things have developed and how we've ended up where we are today. And in the presentations that follow for the rest of today, you're going to hear some more detail about key aspects of the strategy and also some more on some of the key policy objectives as well. And further information, just feel free to either speak to me at some point today or contact me after today's events are finished. So thanks very much for listening.